And my mom's dad, my grandfather, was a theatrical talent agent, Broadway producer. He managed
Oh, how
Rydell at
fun.
one point. He ran Verve Records at one point. It was fun when he would come in because as a little kid, for whatever reason, I somehow got into Tom Jones. So
Okay.
Tom Jones was playing a nightclub here in the area, and my grandfather took us to the show and took me backstage. I think it was 10, and I met Tom Jones. He wasn't much taller than me, frankly, but he was great. It was a great show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me tonight is a return guest. He had so much fun as a duo, he decided to do a solo act. He's kind of Paul Simon without Art Garfunkel, maybe, but Scott Katz, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be back. Glad to see you back.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I do not think the episode where I had this revelation has come out, but I had a guy on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he started talking about summer camp and finding Bruce Springsteen. And I said, I just realized that's a common theme on this podcast. And it's funny because Colin, who is on the podcast, the app shoot, as we're recording, I released it yesterday. He was from Great Britain, but found Bruce in a, East Coast. He had gone to America as in a camp, like as an internship or something, and that's how he discovered Bruce. So, if I remember correct, right? Isn't this how you guys discovered Bruce?
Yeah, you're spot on. As a little kid, in my neighborhood, there were a bunch of guys, and I was kind of the second youngest. So you kind of
Okay.
looked up to these older guys, and they all loved Bruce. And this would have been, mid 70s, dating myself.
Right.
And then I went to overnight camp up in Maine in 77 when I was 9. And looking back now, I didn't realize that was, maybe the golden era of, how much I could have loved and done then if I were a little older, but just got really into it. And one of our counselors used to play his guitar, at night sometimes, and he'd play, a little Grateful Dead, and he'd play Spirit of the Night. And I didn't realize then that I was already liking Bruce until, maybe a year or two later. And then, got into it because, back then there was no internet, there were no, it wasn't as prevalent. Now there was no streaming. You just you had the radio, so
Yeah. Well,
that is how I got into it.
yeah. So anyway, I kind of jumped ahead. Introduce yourself to the audience. I just was remembering though that
Yeah.
Because there are patterns I see, like a lot of times siblings, influence people on their music, either to the pro or the, sometimes you rebel against your older siblings, or,
Yes.
and then, sometimes older siblings feel a responsibility to kind of train their younger siblings. So I just kind of was interested. I had never seen that pattern after all this years, but it is if you grew up in the East Coast, there is a good chance, during that heyday of that time, you discovered Bruce Springsteen by going to summer camp, and either a bunkmate or a counselor either played the music, had a stereo, would play the album. So you kind of reminded me like, oh yeah, that's what we did. So anyway, introduce yourself, Scott, and tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Scott Katz. I grew up in Newton, Mass. not sure who knows where that is or what. It's about 5 or 10 minutes away from Boston College, about 15 minutes from downtown, but everything in Boston is an hour because of traffic.
Right.
So, what do I do? So I been in sales most of my adult life. Had an epiphany, went to law school very late in life, and decided after about 3 weeks that I didn't want to practice, but I went ahead and finished law school, passed the bar, worked in law firms in business development, and then kind of pivoted out into development work for nonprofits, and stumbled into this career that I'm in now, which is for profit, but with a very altruistic bent in that I do K-8 fundraising. Our company is nationwide, and we eliminate the product sales. So no, all the stuff that you and I probably bought or sold in our lives that we didn't really need. I love Girl Scout cookies, but cookies,
Yeah.
popcorn,
Wrapping paper. Yeah.
exactly.
The candles, the,
Cookie
different
dough,
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
and there's nothing wrong with those things, but these days most people would just rather give the money to the school, and so we eliminate the products, and then we bring in inflatables, and we do what we call a day of awesomeness, and we provide this awesome day for the kids to just run around and be kids and have fun. And the whole point that we do is we try and motivate and inspire the kids to, as we say, use their awesomeness together, sort of as a team. And I can tie that into my love for Bruce. Hopefully you'll get to that. But so that's kind of what I do now. It's a lot of fun. I rarely have to, get dressed beyond shorts or sweatpants. And we were able to do it virtually this past year, and it's we raise a lot of money for schools, and which helps them. We're on a really great group of people, and it's just a fun. There's really no downside. It's just always fun. Kids are having fun. The schools are appreciative. They're stressed like any other job, but otherwise it's just a lot lighter in the mind and a lot deeper meaning than helping rich people get richer.
When my son was in Catholic school, first through eighth grade, we did all that, exactly what you're talking about, right? Like you had magazine subscriptions, and you had to sell, like for Boy Scouts, you're selling popcorn and then the different candles and wrapping paper and all this stuff. And about his 6th or 7th grade, they made the decision that said, we're going to give you 2 choices as a parent. And I don't remember the exact numbers, so I'm just making up numbers. Like, you can write us a check for $500, or $250 or whatever it was, or you can buy gift cards through us. And the gift cards, equal to X amount of dollars, which will equate,
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, and I had the best racket because I ran a call center at the time. And so we would go in there and buy gift cards that we would give away to our agents, as spiffs, bonuses.
Right. Sure.
So like we hit my minimum almost immediately. So there were like 2 or 3 other parents that worked at the same company. So when we went there, we did that. So it's nice. So
Yeah.
I think that is rewarding because we all want to support education. We all want to do things, and that's why you're like, I have no interest in this candle, but yeah, like, it's, I want to support your kid. That's fine. And,
Right. Yeah.
so
I mean,
that's fine.
we have I have 2 girls. My older daughter is in college, and we have wrapping paper unopened in my kitchen right now from when she was in 5th grade.
Oh yeah.
So, and we went in with our eyes open. It's not like we were
Yeah.
or anything, but we just didn't need it, So
Yeah.
I just soon say, here's $20 or $50 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Enjoy,
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, and I love the fact that, because too many of us end up working in a job that we hate.
Yep.
I'm thinking of the lyrics of Factory, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see, to hear a story of someone that's ended up finding, their using their law degree for good. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably making half of what I made in firms, but I'm considerably happier. And I liked working in the firms. I wasn't
Yeah.
practicing, but I was helping others sort of develop their practice, and it was fun.
Yeah.
Shame on me. I wanted to try and make more and do more, and moved around to other firms that I didn't like.
Yeah.
And, you end up bouncing around, and I wish I had found this, 20 years ago. It didn't exist then, but I wish
Yeah.
I had it. But it's a blast. It really is a lot of fun. It's like being a camp counselor, to tie back into that. So being a camp counselor all day, working with the kids. So
Yeah, that's got to be fun, and that's
yeah.
great. So I always like to go to the beginning and
Sure.
talk about growing up. Where did you said you grew up there in Mass, but you were one of the youngest on the block. But talk about your parents. Were they into music? Was there a lot of music in your house?
Not really.
Okay.
My dad was very, I don't say old fashioned. He liked more of the standards. He liked Sinatra. He liked. I vividly remember before he'd go out. When my parents would go, another couple on Friday, Saturday night, he'd put on like Jacques Brel is alive and well and living in Paris or something, or Edith Piaf or something like that.
Okay.
And my mom's dad, my grandfather, was a theatrical talent agent, Broadway producer. He managed
How
Rydell at
fun.
one point. He ran Verve Records at one point. It was fun when he would come in, because as a little kid, for whatever reason, I somehow got into Tom Jones. So
Okay.
Tom Jones was playing a nightclub here in the area, and my grandfather took us to the show and took me backstage. I think it was 10, and I met Tom Jones. He wasn't much taller than me, frankly, but he was great. It was a great show.
Oh, how
And,
fun.
lots of different things. When I was single, it was very attractive because I could go to all the different shows and didn't have to pay for them. And
Yeah.
so that was a nice thing through college.
Yeah, I bet.
But not a ton. Like I've sort of bucked the trend, and that doesn't mean my parents weren't into music. They just never. I didn't grow up in a musical house, if that makes
Right.
sense. Also, in fairness, it was just records. I mean, we predating. I mean, the first Sony Walkman came out. I think I was a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like as a kid we had a lot of different options other than FM radio or something. So.
Yeah. Yeah, because my parents, it was all LPs. We
Yeah.
had the big, huge piece of furniture with the TV that had the two big speakers, and you open up, and there was the turntable, and then the other one was the radio. Um, did As you started growing into junior high and high school, what kind of music were you listening to? What was the
So I always had. It's funny you mentioned Simon and Garfunkel before.
Yeah.
So my mom. I was born in New York City. Moved. I don't remember it. We moved to Boston or my parents moved back to Boston when I
Yeah.
was 2. But my mom worked. My grandfather, her dad, got her a job as a administrative assistant in a theatrical, like a Broadway agent's office, who ended up was the manager for Paul Simon. He would never remember, and I certainly don't remember, but he used to play with me in the office while his agent would deal with my mother to get in to see, the lawyer or whatever.
Yeah.
The lawyer and his agent would come in.
Yeah.
So sort of listening to different things, I found that I started getting into, like, I always liked Simon and Garfunkel because that I did hear, and I thought it was kind of cool that there was some family connection.
Do you have a picture of young Scott with Paul somewhere?
No.
Dang, that would be great. That would have been great for the podcast.
Yeah.
When I publish this, that would have been a great photo. Yeah.
My mom said, she used to take me into, we lived across the street from Gracie Mansion, man, whatever it's called in New York City. And there used to be like a playground, and she used to take me over there and go into a little market. And every once in a blue moon, she'd bump into Paul Simon because the lawyer's office wasn't too far away or something. And he would like bend down, and, I'd be in the stroll or whatever. That was as close to, anything. I mean, I'm sure he's kissed a million babies since then.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But it is kind of, it was kind of cool. So I listened to them. That was the first cassette tape that I remember buying, was their greatest hits. And then again, every summer when I would go to camp, I'd get into one new artist or new music, because somebody would be playing it. You kind of want to get it for yourself. So I remember, getting into the Who. Who's Next was the second one I bought. And then, Jay Giles was from Boston, so got into Jay Giles' band. They were getting popular as I became a freshman in high school. And that's around the time, where I was already well into Bruce by that point. I was unique in my school, at least my class. Um, Only a couple of people. I mean, people heard of him, but it was, Hungry Heart. That was all they knew.
Yeah.
And if they really got deeper, okay, I know Born to Run. I mean, they only knew a few songs that were played on the radio, but I was into it. And this is why I never did drugs, because I go all in. So, I mean, every penny I could earn, I was buying Springsteen cassettes and records. I'd double up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working since I was about 16. I used to work for my dad. He had a wholesale textile manufacturer. He would distribute textiles through the country, wholesale, and I was in the warehouse. So every Friday I'd get my paycheck, and there was a store in Cambridge that had bootlegs. I mean, they certainly weren't legal, but they had bootlegs. And I would run down there and I'd find a bootleg every week. I remember blowing like $50, which was almost my check, at that point in time. And it was a nice gig. I'm like, I don't do drugs. I'm not, getting into trouble. I'm buying Springsteen bootlegs, so it was, that's kind of where it came from there. And then, I'm sort of, I like the concept of Pandora. I don't use it today. I use other, but I like the concept of sort of, you find an artist, you find a song, and then you spin off of that. So to me, I'm like, I like this type of music.
Yeah.
So that's how I started listening to Southside Johnny and the Jukes. When Little Steven came out with his first album, I grabbed that. I like John Eddie. I kind of like spun off into these sort of New Jersey sound, John Cafferty, like all these different people. And I'm thrilled to have done that. At the same time, I had sort of, like anyone else, I like pop. I like, I'm a Fanilow. I like Byron Manilow. I like all these other different things that have nothing to do with Bruce. But, I sort of figured at that point at my early stages of idolization of him that, if it was good enough for him and he liked it, there must be something there. So I liked Elvis before, but I certainly liked him more after I heard Bruce loved him. And, sort of got into Elvis. Sam Cooke, is one of my all-time favorites. I don't listen to him in the car anymore out of superstition because I had a nasty car accident.
Oh, no.
Listening to Sam Cooke at the time, so I only listen at home. But, I have a pretty broad range of music, but Bruce is my go-to. I listen to East Street Radio pretty much all day with two exceptions. If Live Cover Me comes on, I switch because I can't stand that song. Any live version. And if the album version of Land of Hope and Dreams comes on, and or the version from the Wrecking Ball tour, I switch it. I can't deal with the electronic heartbeat drums, the doop.
Okay. Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm East Street Radio almost all day, every day.
That's great. Now, I'm going back. I went through a phase, this is in 75, 76, when I was in high school, I bought a ton of Simon and Garfunkel 8-tracks, Cecilia and Feeling Groovy. I just loved I can't remember which album they had that live version of Feeling Groovy, and I just loved that song. And you brought back a lot of memories. I'm now sitting there like, maybe I should go to Amazon and pick up some CDs again, or, and of course, Barry Manilow was an early, in the 70s. It was just, and it was, in fact, when I had to do, we had these bunch of bands of your life questions and, your guilty pleasure. And my guilty pleasure is always Barry Manilow. I just, as a high school kid, I loved hearing his music and, Weekend in New England, Mandy, and it just, and I've seen him live a couple of times, and he's fantastic. He has the same problem that most other artists do. They have a set show. And if you see him on Tuesday in Kentucky or Thursday in Ohio, it's the exact same show with no difference, the same jokes, but it's a damn good show,
Yeah, I'm an unabashed Fanilow. I have no problem telling people I enjoy him.
Yeah.
I like what I like. I don't. not embarrassed to say that. But I love seeing the bands I like. The two I wish I had seen, well, three, I guess Elvis would have been one,
Yeah.
but Seeger, who I guess is retiring, and Tom Petty, who passed away. So
Yeah.
otherwise, I have no regrets. I wouldn't trade, being born earlier to see the Doors. I know I have a friend who saw them and loved it, and I
Yeah.
loved them, but I'm happy where I'm at.
Yeah.
So,
So I said in Twitter that I'm not getting into the sways and waves discussion
yeah.
because I just candidly, I think it's ridiculous the amount of
Yeah.
brouhaha of the passion of both sides,
Yeah.
caring, but I am going to ask you, how do you feel about the No Nukes being released officially?
I
Because
love that.
I do too. I'm
I love
excited to
that.
see the film.
Yeah, that was a bootleg that I remember getting as a kid
Yeah.
and loving it. And you listen to the guest DJs on East Street Radio. Rob Lowe stands out as like a real true non-poser, like a real
Yes.
Ralph Macchio, same thing. Those are the
Yeah.
two I remember, vividly. They were doing a really good job with it. And Rob Lowe sort of said, at that point in time, he wanted to see Jackson Browne, who I've seen and is a great show.
Yeah.
But that's when he fell in love with Bruce. He's like, oh my God, now I get it. And I almost wish I had been able to see that at the time, but it's so cool to just see, a young, carefree, at least on stage. Now we find out, all the different stuff that everybody has going on in their lives at that point.
Sure.
Just like the real golden age of the E Street Band, like they didn't have to worry about people complaining like friends of mine do that he's playing too many covers. I love when he does that.
Yeah.
They just did their thing and just went on until they had enough or the audience couldn't take anymore. And so I'm psyched for No Nukes coming out.
Yeah, I am too. I'm really looking forward to it. How psyched were you? Was the young teenage Scott happy when all these historic bootlegs were remastered and released through the archives with the good sound? I mean, was a young Scott of you happy? Your internal
my internal young Scott, because he's all happy recently. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny to when you get a bootleg, oftentimes they would just give it a name, and some random thing. I vividly remember one of my favorites was Piece de Resistance. And that was from '78. It was one of the shows that has been released. So I'm like, oh my God, I had that, and 30 years ago. You know what I mean? So it is cool to hear him again and sort of place yourself, in your own life and time. And I think Bruce talked about that, when he, about music, and you can sort of place yourself and remember different things or find parts of your life and how you relate to it. But I definitely can remember who I was listening with, when, why, what we liked, what we didn't like. And that's the cool thing with East Street Radio. My kids give me a hard time about it, but I can by the version of the song, I can almost tell where it was and when it was. It's just
that's cool.
Yeah.
I may have asked you this, and if you guys have not, if you're new to the show, I had a friendship month earlier in the year, I guess, and so Scott was on with another friend, Scott. It was the Scott and Scott show, and so please go back and hear that. That was a lot of fun. They met in camp and then later became friends. They rediscovered each other in adults, which I think is just an amazing story. So I may be duplicating a couple of questions, but what about Bruce captivated you? Can you articulate why he became your guy and has remained your guy?
I will try, and you can tell me if I articulate it or not. So I have always loved history, and I like trying to think of the word. Well, I'll try something else because I can't think of it. We're having a senior moment, but
that's all right.
I've always liked sort of team sports. I like the concept of a real band that gets along, not the ones that fight and everybody's got, and I'm sure some of that goes on, but for the most part, it's a pretty cohesive unit that he's created here because they all care so much and are
Yeah.
passionate. And the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, as he, or the 1 + 1 = 3 thing that he stated. And
Yeah.
I from the very first time I heard almost every song, it just hit me like I'm in, I'm sold. It's like love at first sight. You know it when you see it, and you know it when you hear it. But what I always loved was this was a guy that was playing with his friends that grew up essentially with these group of guys, give or take, in and out a few here or there, and they've stayed true to their mission statement and what they represent. And I totally respect the fact he writes his own stuff. That doesn't mean I don't like other people that don't write their own stuff that are just very talented, but to me, it's just to that next level. So to have tradition was the word I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
I'm a traditionalist, so I'm an old school guy, at heart. So for me, this is old school. I view it as. I mean, it's the sound. In my view, the real East Street sound in that in that 70s into even the early 80s era is just gold. I mean, I from the very first time, like literally almost every song. There's very few songs that I have grown to love. I either loved them right away, or I can only think of 2 or 3 that I dislike in his entire catalog that literally dislike. Some I can just take or leave here or there, but there's only very, very few that I dislike.
Okay, good.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes total sense. And living there, and are your team sports, are they all the New England teams, or do you have a wild card in there?
No, I'm pretty, I'm a sports fan, but I'm much more of a Boston fan than a
Okay.
sports fan. I'm not, like looking for the next NHL game or NBA game. I turned on the finals last night because a colleague is in Milwaukee and was super excited. So I watched the most of the second half, but I pretty much didn't care one way or the other. I've always sort of liked Phoenix, because one of my favorite players from the Celtics growing up was Paul Westphal, who unfortunately, after I met him at a function and got an autographed ball, he was traded. And
Oh no.
winning, which was great. And he ended up having, a Hall of Fame level career in Phoenix. So I always rooted for Phoenix. And frankly, they never really were a threat after 76. So
Yeah.
it was us. So I'm more of a Boston fan. I like certain athletes from different teams. I hate the New York teams with a passion. So it's almost, I root for my teams and anyone playing New York.
Yeah.
But so growing up, I like the Dodgers. Now, not a fan, but whoever, unlike some people who say, if your team loses and you root for the team that beat you, I don't subscribe to that theory. I root for whoever I want to at the end.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I rooted for the Cowboys growing up. I didn't like the Steelers.
Yeah.
But only because, the Patriots were so bad. But my kids have no conception of what, myself and the other Scott and my friends dealt with our whole lives. I mean, it was just heartbreak after heartbreak. I mean, the Celtics won all their, the bulk of their titles in the 50s and 60s. I wasn't around then. I saw 2 until Bird, but, Red Sox never won. I was in college in 86, still recovering from that.
Yeah.
And, it just never, the Bruins didn't win. And, I was too little and young at that point, really. So we saw nothing. And, one of my daughters is going to be 17, and I think she's seen 12 parades. I mean, it's just not what we grew up with.
So a couple things. One, they were, I remember the sports station here in Dallas, when the Rangers were playing New York, and like when a few years ago, when the Rangers had that 2-year where they went to the World Series, and there was a kid with a New York cap on, on TV, and they said that this kid has no concept of what he was born into, right? And I'm similar to you. I'm a Dallas fan. Like, when my son is just a sports fanatic, he'll watch anything. But if like I watched, once the Mavericks got out of the playoffs, I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
I just didn't care. If the Cowboys don't make the playoffs, then I don't care. I will tend to, maybe if the Saints, because I grew up in Louisiana, are doing something, or um, as you talked about, if a coworker, someone you're friends with, gets really passionate about someone,
Yeah.
then I'll be inclined to kind of root for them, because hey, um, and it's always interesting to see. And my son is 32, and he talked about that he was born in 89 and in February. So technically Landry was still the coach. Like like 4 weeks into his life is when Jerry Jones bought the team. So he always tells people I was a Landry baby. And he can vaguely remember, because, like 2 or 3, 4, maybe, he had no sports consciousness.
Right.
So for all his life, the Cowboys have just sucked. And he's just like, he's bitter. He's like, you don't expect good things
Right.
just because it's the Cowboys.
Right.
They're going to screw it up. He says, they're going to draft someone that, well, except for him being under investigation of, killing his mother, he would have been a first round draft pick. But, so we're going to get him in the 3rd round. And, well, he had a devastating injury, but we think he's going to come back. So we're going to try and fly on him. And Chris is like, just get a good player. Just draft someone good,
And don't get me wrong, I don't begrudge anybody in New York or the tri-state area that roots for the Yankees or whatever. That's their team. They should be rooting.
Exactly.
Like,
absolutely.
I object. I have friends that, just cherry pick and, grab whoever's the at the time and root for them. And I don't like that. I'd rather, I have friends that rooted for the Pirates, their entire life. And, they had that one good year, but it's been so long. And so I'll root for Pittsburgh if they're in there. The Pirates, I won't root for the Steelers. I just never liked them. But I definitely don't begrudge anybody for rooting for their favorite team. I like the passion, and then that's what I prefer. I'm a my heart's on my sleeve with everything, again.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm happy.
And were you happy for Brady?
Sure.
Yeah. I was too.
Yeah. I find it amusing that, people that were, he's a cheater, that don't understand him. Anybody who's ever left a basketball or a football in their garage, over the winter and comes back and it's dead will understand, the weather changes things. But the animus, and I get it, because look, I love the Cowboys, and then they start winning a lot. All right, now I'm ready for somebody else. Everybody hates the underdog. But I mean, the Patriots were the laughing stock of the league for almost 40 years. I mean, we went through a lot of tribulations, and this is unprecedented, and he's an incredible player. But now he goes to Tampa, and all of a sudden, the same people that would have been yelling and screaming as a cheater, oh no, now it doesn't matter, and now they love everything that's happening. And that's how sports is, and that's great. But I definitely, was happy for him, and I'm happy that he's getting some of the recognition that he frankly should have had all along. So that being said, I think there are times where he can be tough to root for, because the whole TB12 nonsense, and the guy he partners with is kind of a snake oil salesman, and in a lot of ways, Boston's more of a meat and potatoes type of town, and I'm not a Peyton Manning fan, but at least he's appealing to the everyman. Brady's appealing to the 1%, and that's fine. But it makes it a little bit tougher to find common ground.
Yeah, that's like Chris talks about. Dirk is his modern day Staubach or Aikman, because Dirk did get a championship, but was just seemed to be, from all things, just a good guy. Yeah. Just someone who loved playing the game and loved winning and was working that. So, Chris will often say, yes, I would have Dirk's baby.
Yeah.
I get that.
I mean, Larry Bird, when he played for the Celtics, lived around the corner down the street, not even a 5-minute bike ride, as a kid.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, I used to drive back and forth, not literally, to the end of the street. I'd make sure I drove past his house coming and going any which way I could. And I'd spot him, mowing his lawn, raking his
Yeah.
leaves himself. I mean, this was one of the first, millionaire athletes in this area, and he's doing his own yard work. I mean,
Yeah.
that's who he was. And when they'd win, there would be like 6 or 7 cars out front. It was the Celtics would go over there and have a party. And he lived on one side of the Brookline dump or recycling center, whatever you want to call it. And his agent, Bob Wolf, lived on the other side.
How
So
cool.
that's,
Yeah.
and when there was a Sports Illustrated when he first joined the Celtics, and he was playing sort of one-on-one at a house with a hoop with his agent. And that was my friend's house who lived across the street from the agent. So it was just kind of cool that he was there. I mean, I can't say he was very friendly. I mean, we'd honk the horn. You just kind of look at you like, what?
Yeah. Exactly.
It was still cool. It was better than not seeing him,
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So talk to me about live experiences. How many times have you seen Bruce? Though, of course, the amount of times is not a fair barometer
Yeah, no.
of how many times you're a fan.
Yeah, I've seen him 57, once on Broadway, 56 others.
Are you going to try to go this new section?
So I was going to try when I was in New York last week. I went Tuesday night overnight into I just drove down and drove back. And I was going to go and try and grab a ticket on Monday. But my wife told me that if I did that, she was going to buy a cat. And I hate cats.
Okay.
So
all right.
Until I can negotiate a better arrangement on my end, I'm probably going to try and resist.
That's a bad deal.
Yes.
Yes.
And again, I don't begrudge anyone who likes cats. I just don't.
Right.
So, she's generally a team player, but she's kind of putting her foot down, and you got to pick your battles.
Absolutely, yes. So anyway, you said 57 times, including Broadway once.
Yep. Including Broadway once. I gave up tickets to 2 other concerts over the years, which I regretted at the time, and looking back, it was the right decision. One was one of my best friends, ironically, another guy named Scott, not the one who was on.
Okay.
I think before, I try to have as many friends named Scott as possible. It just makes things easier for me.
Yes, it is.
But it was his parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and it was in New York City. And this concert was like in Syracuse. It was a real schlep to drive. So I gave up those tickets and ended up getting tickets at a different show, but I still consider that I gave up the tickets. And then the very first time he was coming to Fenway Park, I obviously was going to get tickets with the Scott who was on, before last time we were together as we normally do. And it was my wife's grandmother's 90th birthday, and the whole family extended was flying to Florida. And our girls were really little. She wanted to see the kids or the babies. And it was the right decision. It was the mature decision. It would have taken a lot of heat from her parents, from her, rightfully so, and my mother. So it just wasn't worth the heartache. Ironically, my white whale, so to speak, at the time was Frankie. That was the song I wanted to hear like no other. And he played it at Fenway that first time. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Since then, I've heard it like 3 times, including the next time he came to Fenway. So sort of have got that. But it could have been closer to 60. As long as it's more shows than my age, I'm content.
Well, when he toured for the reunion, there was something family going on that not as important as a birthday. Like my son had a football game or some kind of dance or something that I just didn't. And that I regret going, okay, look, hey, so I didn't see him till the Rising tour.
Yeah.
And so I have that, to put the sports analogy right. Like when you miss the extra point early in the game, you chase that the rest of the game. I feel like starting only in 2002, I'm chasing to try to catch as many shows as I can to see. And so
I've hit most of my bucket list with that. I wanted to see, show in New York. I've been to a few. I wanted to see New Jersey. I've been to a bunch. I wanted to see him in Philly. I flew down to Philly and went with a buddy who had never seen him. So that was a nice treat. We went to Florida another time to see my wife's grandmother. And I was looking, I'm like, who's going to be in Fort Lauderdale? Pretty close.
Yeah.
So we went to that. But I'll toss this scenario. The one I'd like to see him in Europe, and I haven't done that, but that would be the one I haven't. I've been to Arizona and saw him out there with a
Yeah.
buddy. I've hit all the New England states. Philly, DC would be nice.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I would love to go to Europe. I would when he was touring Australia during the High Hopes era.
Yeah.
I was the owner of the company I was working for at the time, who was like in his middle 60s, maybe late 60s, and was coming to work on Saturday mornings, and of course, that's the reason why he's a millionaire. But I was like, at that age, I had that much money, I would be flying to Australia and just doing the whole tour, like like, okay, just getting that and just doing the tour, because then between shows you would see this great country and this other beautiful scenery, and what a great culture to do. And so I really would love to go to Ireland. I just think those are good shows.
Yeah.
And once again, when you weren't at a show, you'd be in Ireland, so you could see and enjoy the culture there.
Yep. So one thing I would, if anyone has never seen Bruce in Hartford,
I
would, and you can get there, every single time it's an amazing show, and he pulls some random song out of nowhere.
I wonder why.
I don't know, but they're always good in Hartford every single time.
Yeah.
No, without fail.
Yeah.
And so let me pose this to you. So my wife at one point, joking with my girls, says, what if I were giving birth? What if I was going into labor and you were in New York, seeing a show? What would you do? And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Deliver the kid? Like, I'll come home the next day. What am I? I'm walking into the show. Yeah, I'm going to hop. By the time I get home, you're going to have the kid anyway. Like, so they didn't like that answer, but I was kind of hyperbole, but kind of serious. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to, So.
Yeah. So we did have my wife was doing a half Ironman, and it was on a Sunday, and she said, I know you're bored going to these events, so you don't need to go. Like, okay. Her sister Mary and my son went. She goes, I said, are you sure? Because I want to be supportive. No, you don't need to go. And then later it turned out that that was the free NCAA show was on that Sunday. And I was like, phew. She had already told me I didn't have to go, because there was, just between you and me, right? There's no way I was missing a free show right there in downtown Dallas to go watch her compete in a race. So I get that. Linda asked about, do you want to go see him again this time? And I said, well, first off, I don't think we can afford it. I just missed a couple of months and of work. And while people were very generous in the GoFundMe, I said, all that money has gone to make sure that, all our bills are paid and everything.
Right.
I said, so even though if we could find the money, it seems kind of selfish that my first trip after having surgery and you've taken such care of me to tell you, okay, thanks, Linda, I'm going to see Bruce, right? Like we should be doing something together. It's the same reason why, a couple of people reached out and said, well, are you going to go to Dragon Con now that it's coming back? And that's one of my other passions. I love to go. It's down in Labor Day in Atlanta. It's a huge sci-fi pop culture, convention. And I'm like, no, I can't go somewhere without Linda. She's got to do the trip. Now, 2022, she is prepared. She's like, I know we may be eating bologna sandwiches for you to get to see as many shows as you can. Yeah. And she wants to go to at least one. She goes, and I won't try to go more than that so you can go to more, but she goes, I want to see at least one. And I go, I want you to go at least one.
Right. that's kind of how I am with this. You know, like I, it's hard to justify the cost of the ticket, even if you can get it, you know, in the mid range.
Yeah.
I justified it the first time because it was going to be once. Who knew it was going to happen again? You know,
Right.
so
Yeah.
you know, now, I mean, look, I'm fortunate where I live location wise that I can drive. You know, it's a 3.5 hour ride. I can crash with a couple of different
Yeah.
buddies. You know, you get a discount parking app, and you know, parking only costs you, you know, $58 instead
Right.
of 10. Um, and you know, I can pretty much go to the show, wake up, and drive home. You know, it's not that big a deal. But it's still, you know, you're looking at somewhere between a, you know, $300 to $500 night, you know, at
Yeah.
least. So I can only imagine what it's like for someone like yourself in Texas. You're in Texas, right? I mean,
Right.
I mean, that's especially now the airfare is so crazy everywhere. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's no picnic. So
Yeah. When I went the first time, I was able to find on one of the travel sites a round trip on American that was direct, and then wrapped in there was one of those little, I can never remember the name of it, but they were little. It's not a boutique hotel, but it's one of those hotels that are basically the room is the size of a cruise, like a
yeah,
cruise ship.
right.
I mean, and it was
You
perfect for me.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
open the door, you just miss the bed by an inch or something.
exactly. I mean, you walked in and it was like there's the bed. There was they had a small TV. They had a little desk if you needed to. That was also your nightstand, and you had a shower and a sink and a commode. And it
Yeah,
was like, I'm not going to stay here. I'm just doing this so I can,
right.
I was able to shower before the show, go meet Bella
Yeah,
for dinner,
yeah,
and then go see the show. Went back, slept, and then got up and flew home. So it was great. But yeah, it was easy, $800-900 all
yeah.
all in.
I mean, in the '80s, would have been '85. So that was my
Yeah,
senior year of high school and freshman year of college. But I went with three friends and we drove to Jersey to the Meadowlands and saw a show outside at I guess it was, I don't know if it was called Giant Stadium then, but we
yeah,
went there and we kept bickering. You know, are we staying in this hotel? We got a hotel, but are we doing it? Are we not doing it? And we're like, yeah, screw it. And we drove home.
yeah,
So, you know, like a good 4.5, 5 hour ride after seeing Bruce, you know,
yeah,
so um, you know, I got home and I slept in the driveway because my parents had already the chain. They weren't expecting me. The chain was on the door. You know, I'm
yeah.
like, what am I going to do? I was, you know, they dropped me off. See you later, and they went home, and I'm sleeping under, you know, half under my dad's car. You know, so
That's funny.
yeah,
All right, so you've gotten Frankie a couple of times. What else are you
yep.
chasing? What songs have you not heard live that you want to hear? And
Um,
excluding Letter to You and Western Stars,
yeah. So
obviously.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah,
So I, I mean, I granted this is the rarest of rare for most anyone, but I'd love to hear The Promise.
yeah, that would be good.
I think that's a lot of people on a lot of people's bucket list. But
Yeah, and The Wish would have been on my list too, and because of
yeah,
Broadway, I got to see that. Right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, again, fortunate to where I live for whatever reason. You know, I have friends that go and see him in Jersey or New York, and they'll call at certain songs so we can hear like portions of the
yeah.
song. And for whatever reason, we always here in Boston, always, you know, 3 times, 2 or 3 times, we get Thundercrack. So
Wow. Yeah.
I guess because he used to play this little club, Paul's Mall, down in, you know, long
Mhm.
closed, Cambridge, Boston
Yeah.
area. And he played it then. So he would just start smiling and start playing it. And we get, you know, Hartford, he always seems to play Loose Ends, which is a favorite. So I really don't have, there's nothing that I'm like, there's nothing like Frankie was when I was waiting for that. Like that
Right.
just like it's never going to happen. And it finally did. So I'm a pretty easy customer to please. Like I love almost everything. Cover Me being an exception, but I sort of I deal with that because I know other people like it and he's not there
Yeah.
to play just for me. So usually when he plays Cover Me, there's something else that he plays and I'm like, you know what, that's a trade. I'll take that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Of
yeah.
with the two albums, are there two or three songs you especially are looking forward to hear?
if I
between
were the
Western Stars.
priest,
Yeah.
if I was the priest, I think is as close to a perfect song as there has ever been made. When I listen to that, I find that I cannot not listen to it at least 3 times in a row.
Yeah, I
I just
agree.
keep listening. It's perfection. So I'm dying for that. Um, I tip of the hat to my buddy Neil in New York, who right from the get go loved "I'll See You in My Dreams." To me, the 3 songs he wrote in the '70s were the 3 that I would pick first. But
Yeah.
I've come around. "Song for Orphans" would be another one I'd want to hear. "See You in My Dreams," I think is a 10 out of 10. I like "Burning Train" a lot. I mean,
I do too.
there's nothing I'm skipping. Even
Right. Exactly.
there, I don't love "House of a Thousand Guitars." I know there are people that love it. It's okay.
Right.
Um, "Rainmaker" is okay. It seems out of place with the rest of the album, but it's fine. Those are the only 2 that I'm not like dying to hear, but I don't skip them.
Yeah.
So
I pictured Burning Train as the opening track. Now, then when you heard Ghost on Saturday Night
right,
Live,
right.
like, okay, I could see them starting with that. It is, yeah, I think that's very cool. It'll be good to see. On my first world worries is that when they tour, they won't do any Western Stars because they've got a whole,
Right,
E Street band to promote, and
right.
if who knows what else he's going to put out.
Yep,
But I would love to get at least a couple from Western Stars.
yep,
I would, Little Steven did a version of Tucson Train, and so that kind of
yep,
pictured I could see the E Street band doing that well,
yep.
and a couple other things.
I was fortunate enough pre-pandemic to see Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul in
Yeah.
Medford, Mass. Where for those outside of Mass, that's where Tufts is located, down close to there. So that was the show. This was when Western Stars had just come out, and I love Western Stars, but I love the rock more than
Yeah.
the lighter sound. So that show with Stevie was the show that I was dying to see. I mean,
Yeah.
it was unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
he's so underappreciated as a songwriter, a musician, a
Yeah.
band leader. Just he takes second fiddle, and he frankly did it with Southside as well. The Southside and the Jukes I've seen maybe at least 9 times, maybe 10. They're fantastic. It is just so much fun. I took my nephew to a show. It was an under 21. I got him in at the time. Somebody gave me tickets, and he was like, "How are these guys not more popular?" Like and he's a modern kid. He's just out of college, and he's like, I
Yeah.
don't understand. They're unbelievable, and they are. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. So, um, I I would go. I would run to see Stevie again if I could. And
Yeah. I saw him
fantastic.
the first round, and then I had tickets for the second time. He was supposed to play Fort Worth, and he got sick.
Mm.
That was at the very end of the second,
Yeah.
when he was doing the tour, and he got ill, and so the show ended up canceling. Um, do you have any live music coming up, Scott?
So I have a buddy that is very into Southside and always gets tickets, and I usually get a call. Um, hey man, I got 4 for this date. I'll see you then. All right.
Yeah.
So I know Southside's coming to the area. He usually comes in Salisbury, Mass, which is like north near the New Hampshire border on the
Okay.
beach. And I want to say it's usually in August. So I know that there's something coming up. I haven't got the call yet, but I'm hoping and wishing and praying. So I'm looking forward to that. That would be the show I'd be waiting for, unless I can figure out a way to get to I mean, I can get to New York. It's whether I
Yeah.
the bullet
Whether
and
you can put up
pray
with
I
a
don't get a
cat.
cat. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
So we've opened, Texas has opened up a lot, and so Sarah Hickman, who is retired, she does not perform much anymore. She's a singer-songwriter that started in Dallas, moved to Austin, and has performed a lot. She was a few years ago the official musician of Texas. We've been friends and fans. Her first album in the liner notes is along with a couple of dozen other likes. It's not just to us, but to Jesse, Linda, and Baby, because Linda was pregnant when the first album came out.
Yeah.
And she's playing at Poor David's Pub at the end of the month. And so I'm really excited to go and see her. Marsha Ball from New Orleans is playing in the middle of August here in a little local venue. And then in the, I believe it's September, I'd have to look, but I had bought tickets before the pandemic to see Michael Nesmith and Mickey Dolenz, the Monkees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've rescheduled that, and I'm excited to go see that. I think it's going to be a fun show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's just nice to see stuff going on. Like, you know, when I was in New York last week, I told you before we started,
Yeah.
you know, we went to a comedy club, Comedy Cellar in Greenwich Village.
Yeah.
And Al Franken was the surprise headliner. So that
Yeah.
was funny. But it was just nice to see people out and doing stuff again and looking forward to live music. And, you know, the last Southside show I saw, John Cafferty and Beaver Brown open. So that was like,
fun.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
So many more good songs than I remembered they had. But it's always fun, you know, it's just a good time, and enjoy it while we can. I mean, you know, these guys aren't getting, I'm not getting any younger. They're not getting any younger. So
absolutely.
So I want to see as many as I can for as long as I can. And, you know, for those, I have friends and family that still, not my wife, she's good, but others that still sort of roll their eyes like, what are you doing? You know? And I'm like, look, you know, I don't do drugs. You know, I'm a social drinker at best these days. You know, I don't beat my wife and kids. I don't, you know, I don't steal. I don't, you know, I mean, you know, if my vice is that I like to see Bruce a couple times every tour, so what? You know what I mean? So, you know, that's,
and you know, there are people that, like, you know, travel to Europe to see 2 or 3 stages of the Tour de France, right?
Yeah.
You know, there are people that travel with, you know, that go to name the pro football team, to go to the home games and the away games, you know, so there's different things. And so, yeah, it's absolutely, and it's been a long time coming. No pun intended. Exactly. That, you know, it's good to see, and I'm excited about it. And I'm hoping to see as many shows as I can. Any final thoughts, Katz? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, in many ways, other than family, Bruce is my longest relationship. You know, it's one-sided, of course, but, you know, he's, you know, I've never been let down. The only time that I was kind of, you know, wary was when, you know, he split with the E Street Band. At the time, you know, you understand somebody wants to try something new. I'm not big on change for the sake of change. You know, he had his reasons that we find out later with the book and everything, but and those shows were great.
Yeah.
And he was working harder than maybe he's ever worked to make them great for people. Because he realized people were expecting, you know, the same level. But I have to say, you know, listening now, like when I get a concert on, especially if I'm driving, like for work, if I have to go to Connecticut or Rhode Island, you know, I'm in the car for a while, or when I was driving to New York, you know, in East Street Radio, they put on, you know, the concert like at noon or whatever, or coming home at night. And I get one of those shows, I even if it's in Boston and I went to it, which I like listening to, I'm moving along. Like I give him my full attention and my love at the time. I don't need to do it now. I sort of look at it that way. And I you know, now as you know, you get older, you can sort of play favorites a little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of how I do it.
Good. So any final thoughts?
I'm just, you know, it's very cliched, but, you know, of all the times you could live, you know, to live in most of his career, you know, how do you complain? And, you know, you get the best of most of it. And now with all these reissues, you get a taste of it from back in the day. So like I said before, I'm content with, you know, what I've got as far as being a Bruce fan. I'm grateful as anything. And, you know, I feel pleased with myself in a way that I unintentionally at the time hitched my wagon to the right horse.
Yeah.
I have friends that I vividly remember arguments in high school, you know, George Michael is the best, or, you know, this, and I'm like, he's not, but it's okay if you think so.
Yeah.
But look, and it's not a question of he passed away, that people's careers just kind of have faded, and Bruce just keeps going and reinventing himself. And even, like I have a friend who loves Eric Clapton. Clapton's unbelievable. He's a phenomenal guitarist. He's great, but where's he been? I mean, and it's not a knock. Most people stop. They retire.
Well, and I've said this multiple times, right? And I'm gonna have to look up at who said that. But I had one of my guests, say he was at a reunion show. He was standing on the pit, and he was sitting there, and he goes, "This is it. This is the height of my Springsteen fandom. They had broken up.
Yeah.
They've come back. We've got to see them in all the full glory.
Right.
And maybe every few years they'll tour, but this is the peak of E Street."
Yeah.
And he says, you want to go tell that guy, man, you've got the Rising coming.
Right.
You have Wrecking Ball coming.
Yeah.
You have Magic coming. You have
Letter
Broadway, Letter
Yeah.
to You coming.
Yeah.
A whole nother, of just
another career. I mean, it's
another
like
career.
Another career. It's to bring it back to when you mentioned Tom Brady earlier.
Yeah.
They had that first run, the Patriots, with Brady, and that dynasty, if you want to use that word. And then there's a gap, and then they did it again.
Right.
That's so unbelievable with the same guy. It's amazing, and we don't get to see that very often. And these days, anybody who does anything good is all of a sudden instantly the best ever.
Right.
And that's just not the case. And that's why I feel like I really, and I didn't mean to, I wasn't planning ahead, Lord knows, but like I said, you like what you like. And I knew that this, whether anyone else liked him or not, I didn't care. If I was the only one in that audience, that was fine with me. And I'm just as happy to be one of, 50,000. So
absolutely. And I've got 5.5 years of episodes of people who share our passion. So I asked you, but I'm going to ask you again the Mary question. So so officially you guys answered it both last time, and it's okay if you change your answer. But for those of you who may not have listened to the podcast before, the question is, at the end of Thunder Road, does Mary get in the car? So Scott, does Mary get in the car?
I am going to, as I am with most things in my life, I'm going to stay consistent with my first answer.
Okay.
If I had done that on my SATs, I might have done better. But I think you have to be a real sour puss to think that she doesn't. And I think I really have thought about it, as opposed to last time it was more off the cuff. But then, and knowing I was going to come back and speak with you again, I've thought about it a lot more, and I really can't come up with a scenario that makes any sense to me where she doesn't.
Okay.
At least from the narrator's perspective, I think she does.
All right.
I hope she does.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my mind, she does, because I love happy endings. All right. If someone wants to reach you, how can they?
So, I guess, how can they reach me? So I have a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page, a Twitter account, Instagram. My company's called Power of Purpose, or POP.
Okay.
So if you went on Facebook, it would be Power of Purpose, like Metro West Boston, because at the time it was sort of a smaller territory than what it's become. But that's a good way to find out, the company. Okay. My contact info is there. My Twitter handle is Scott F. Katz, Katz.
Okay.
And happy to engage with any Bruce fans. I did kind of chuckle as well over the sways and waves, and I don't know about you. I know you didn't want to talk about it, but I almost feel like we have to say something. And that,
sure,
like I said, I'm a traditionalist, and in the lyrics in the album it says waves, right?
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, all right, it's waves. I mean, he wrote it,
Yeah.
But almost every time, if you see him live, he says sways.
Yeah.
So maybe he had a mea culpa, or maybe he's sort of adapted lyrics to certain songs over time. Anyway, I thought it was funny that John Landau sort of came out and said, "Oh, it's officially a correction." I think that's kind of moving the goals after the fact, but
yeah, it is kind of
a little silly.
It is just, it, I think the passion of how both camps feel is what I find like, okay, just, um, did Tony Soprano die at the end of The Sopranos? Right? Like he either did or he didn't.
Right.
And you can't convince either, someone who believes the other than not. I don't.
Right.
We are in the middle of rewatching The Sopranos.
I did that at the beginning of the pandemic. It was
Yeah.
the second time. Yeah.
It was. Oh, it's just amazing. You're just sitting there going, we're in the middle of the second season, and we're like, this is so freaking good.
Yeah.
I mean, this, and also just the sadness of James Gandolfini not being with us, because he is brilliant in this.
Yep.
So yeah, and so, and knowing the ending doesn't affect my appearance. And like, I personally, because I'm an optimist, he didn't die.
Right.
But I certainly understand that someone says, no, every clue points to that he was killed. That's why it went to dark. Right. Okay, that's great. I don't need to argue that thing. It's just, that's what I believe, and I'm okay. And same thing about ways and sways. I just, I don't worry as much.
It doesn't matter to me. It makes it just as much difference as some of the lyrics where you just kind of, when you're singing a line, you go, because you don't know the words.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
The meaning's still there for me. But funny thing I did want to mention to you is I don't know if you remember when we spoke last time, is I told you what I think is a pretty funny story of a friend in New York named Scott, who I felt screwed me over when Bruce was playing solo, was at the Beacon Theater and couldn't get me tickets because he didn't want to. Do you remember this story? No,
please tell it again. Once you tell it, I'm going to remember. But yeah.
All right. So one of my dearest, closest friends, the guy I stayed with in New York last week, used to live in the apartments above the Beacon Theater.
Okay.
And Bruce was going on the solo tour and was gonna play the Beacon Theater, and my eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. I'm like, oh my God, he's right there. He can run downstairs. And wait a minute, I think he knows the manager of the theater.
I'm now remembering the story. Yes.
All
go ahead.
Things. This is like the one favor, this is like my dearest, closest friend.
Yeah.
Since college. And I call him, I'm like, and he's not a big fan. I've taken him once. He loved it, but he's not a not so fan. I'm like, you got to do me this favor. You got to get me, even if you get me one, but if you can get 2 tickets, I'll pay, you come, or whatever it is. He's like, all right, let me look. All right. And he calls me back like later that day, and he's like, yeah, look, I can't do it. I'm like, what do you mean you can't do it? He's like, I'd have to sleep with her, the manager of the hotel. Now, this friend, to this day, he has the guy friends he has, you can count on one hand. I mean, this guy, he's just interested in anyone but women. He's married now, so it's a little different. But at the time he was single. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, use colorful language, but I mean, kidding me.
Take one for the team, dude.
Exactly. Be a team player. Like the one time I need you to do this, and he didn't do it. So I didn't go. And I stayed with him. And just so you would ask me last time, you thought it was funny that there's still, this is 20 plus years ago. I talked to him frequently. Sometimes it's every few days, and sometimes every few weeks, but frequently. And every other time I mentioned that, and I did mention it to him this last trip, that I'm still pissed, and I'll hold that grudge till we die. I mean,
I'm sure he's sitting there like, let it go. Like, no, never.
Oh, he thinks it's funny, and I don't think he understands it. I don't. So yeah, So I'll mention that. God forbid he goes before I do, and I give a eulogy. I'll mention it at the eulogy. He screwed me.
So I'll tell you a quick story that's not Bruce related, but Linda and I started dating way back in like 1980, and we started dating like in February. And her parents were incredibly lovely people. I mean, would have us over for barbecues and all these things. And so as we get closer to Christmas, I'm like, oh, so, what's the plan? Oh, you're not invited Christmas Eve. What? We do family only Christmas Eve. What? Yeah. So, I mean, after, like, if I said, well, when are we going to do our Christmas? And she's like, well, if you want to come afterwards, we can go to midnight mass and we can do, but no, we don't yeah, you're not invited to our house at Christmas Eve. That's okay. So the second year we were dating, same thing. Like, then the third year we're dating, it's still, no, you're not invited.
Right.
And then the fourth year we were engaged. So Linda pushed to say, okay, he should be invited, officially engaged. And
I'm
her
surprised
sister,
she had to push. Isn't that like?
yeah, nope. And so her sister Mary, who was engaged at the same time, said, nope, we just want it family one last time. So you can imagine the first Christmas after our marriage, I'm like, F you, I am not going to Christmas Eve. They can
Right.
kiss my ass,
Right.
if I was going to. And so, and Linda had to say, look, if you love me, you got to let this go. So Clayton is my brother-in-law that ended up marrying Mary. And
Yeah.
so, and every Christmas, this story comes up. I mean,
As it should.
and Mary and
Yeah.
Linda are like, oh, let it go.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, no. It's so.
Yeah, look, I get it, man. I'm a loyal guy and I hold grudges. That's what they're there for.
I just, so I appreciate that. So I will have to tell Linda that story.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. He's my best friend, but I mention it
Yeah,
all
exactly.
the time.
Yeah. All right, Scott, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck
Great.
to you. And hopefully no cat, I'm
Yeah.
if you end up giving in, I may have to have you come on for a quick, like how you're getting to know the new pet in the house. So
Exactly. Yeah. It's yeah. I for a pretty reasonable woman, I think this is an unreasonable request. She would argue that I promised the cat a long time ago. I feign ignorance on that, but
yeah, I don't remember. Yes. So,
yeah, so.
All right, listeners, you be safe. Go get vaccinated. There is no reason not to. We need to get us back to normal. In the meantime, remember to social distance, wear your mask when you need it, and let's all take care of each other because that's how we're going to get through this. For now, goodbye, and we'll talk to you soon. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlustingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlustingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlustingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.